Special thanks to the K Family Foundation, lead underwriters for Mosaic. Hello, my name is Barbara Kay, and on behalf of my co-host Susan Pertnoy and the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, I'd like to welcome you to our program, Mosaic.
Our special focus today is the Commission for Jewish Education special event speaker, the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. We'll be back with our program and our guests after this brief message.
Just a sailor in a great big sea, searching for what's meant for me. And I thank my lucky stars every single day. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When the storm begins to blow, and when I've lost my way back home, oh, there is an answer.
Welcome back. And before we speak to Madeleine Albright, we have with us Iris Kohler, the Executive Director of the Commission for Jewish Education of the Palm Beaches. Welcome.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, we're glad to have you. Tell us, what is the mission of the CJE?
The Commission for Jewish Education is really the organization in our community that serves as a central address for families, for individuals, and for educators who are looking for resources and materials to grow their own learning or to find connections to other places in our Jewish community.
Well, you have some wonderful programs that are very popular in this community. Can you describe some of them?
Absolutely. The biggest work we do is actually behind the scenes work, the work we do with educators in all of our synagogue schools, our early childhood centers, and our day school, in really growing their skills in pedagogy and in content knowledge so that they can better reach and teach students and families in our community. But beyond that, we have some signature programs that we provide directly to community members. We have the J.N. Summers Yad program for children with special needs. It's the only Hebrew school in our community for children with significant special needs. We also run the PJ Library program, and with that program, which sends Jewish books to families raising young Jewish children from 6 months to age 6 every month, we also work with those families to help them connect to other organizations within our Jewish community.
That's wonderful.
And we run the Melton Program for Adult Jewish Learning, a wonderful program of significant and deep study for adults who are really interested in building their own Jewish content knowledge.
The Melton Program, is that a year or 2 years?
It depends upon, actually here it depends upon which class you're in. It's 2 years of study, 60 hours each year. But because we are partly a snowbird community, we've been very creative with the program. We've created 15-week snowbird sessions so that people can come and study over 4 years instead of 2 years and still gain that same amount of content knowledge.
Next, we're going to speak to Madeleine Albright, and can you tell us why she's with us tonight?
Absolutely. We are so pleased that Madeleine Albright is joining us. It's our signature fundraising event this year, our trustee patron event. And it is a wonderful evening chaired by 2 Palm Beach community members, Lynn Ross and Alan Shulman. And we're just so pleased that we have over 80 people joining us tonight to hear from this former Secretary of State.
Well, that sounds like an intimate evening for a very special person.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to having her share a little bit more about her story and her finding her Jewish connection.
Well, that's very exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan.
Welcome to Mosaic and to Palm Beach. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, listen, I have to tell you, Madam Secretary, I've read most of the things that you've written, but this one I'm crazy about.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm crazy about this Prague in winter. It's a remembrance that has had to create a lot of emotion for you to be able to put this out.
Well, it did, and I'm glad I wrote it. But it's kind of a book. I talk about it in 3 layers. The inner
layers?
Well, the inner core of it is my family story about my parents and about my father being a diplomat, finding out about being Jewish, and so that's the inner core. And then the next layer is about what happened in World War II and how it affected people's lives. And then the third layer is actually in many ways the most complicated, which is about how difficult it is to make moral decisions, that people think everything's in black and white, and it's not. There are an awful lot of gray areas and trade-offs and choices, and so that's kind of how I constructed it.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I thought the core was choice. How you make a choice in life. Make a left, you go right. If there's an opportunity, you grab it. It's not easy for a woman to do that.
No, it's not, and because a lot of decisions are made for you. That was certainly in my case when I was little, but then you have to not close off options and take opportunities. That's what I believe.
Yeah, what made you so strong?
Well, I think it really is my background. I mean, what happened was I was 2 when we left Czechoslovakia, and I lived in England during the war. My father then became ambassador to Yugoslavia when I was 8 years old. Then they sent me to school in Switzerland when I was 10, and we came to the United States when I was 12. And so I had to make it, you know, and I just, I like making the choices when I can and standing up for myself.
You said something in the book about, one of the books, I don't remember which one, about the fact that you went to Wellesley and you went to an all-girls college, women's college, I should say, and you felt very secure in that, and that gave you a lot of strength, too.
Well, I loved being at Wellesley, and I think that it was a place. I had gone to a girls' high school, and I'd gone there on scholarship, and when I went to Wellesley, I was on scholarship, but nobody seemed to care. And there really were, all the leaders had to be women, and my best friends are still from Wellesley, and I got a great education and a lot of friends, so what could be better about a college than that?
You're absolutely right. What was it like to be the ambassador to the United Nations?
Well, I loved it, actually. It was, there were many, many challenges, and it was after the United Nations had kind of unfrozen after the Cold War. Because the first President Bush and Gorbachev of Russia had decided that they could use the United Nations. And so I was there in the 90s when we were looking at all kinds of peacekeeping operations and all the different things that the UN could do. I was a child of the UN because my father, his last job had been as the Czechoslovak representative to deal with India and Pakistan over Kashmir. So I always thought the UN was terrific. It needed a lot of work, but I was very, very glad to be there.
You know, I was curious, you didn't have any difficulty as a woman dealing with some of these countries where women are not looked at the same level that you are?
Well, it's interesting. I actually didn't, because it makes a big difference to be the United States. And the question was then, how do we make clear what our views are? But what was strange, when I was there were 183 countries at the UN. And it was one of the first times I didn't have to cook lunch myself. So I asked my assistant to invite the other women ambassadors there. And I went to my apartment, and I got there were only 6 other women. And they were from Kazakhstan, Philippines, Canada, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, Liechtenstein, and me.
Oh, right.
And because I was the American, I created a caucus, and we called ourselves the G7.
And you stood strong together.
Strong, and we lobbied. And what we did was we managed to get women judges on the War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which was really important because most of the crimes have been committed against women. So we did kind of fight above our weight, so to speak.
Do you think that the UN really exhibits the moral attitude that it should have?
I think that it is not doing the job that President Roosevelt and President Truman wanted it to do, but it is a valuable venue, and it is a place where representatives of all the countries can talk about a number of different issues, and some of the things it's done have been very useful and others have not, but you know, that old cliche, if it didn't exist, we'd invent it now.
On that moment, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the remainder of our program right after this brief message.
Or far. Oh, I believe that light will find us there. And through the dark. Oh, I believe that light will find us there. Oh, I believe that light will find us there. Oh, I believe that light will find us there. Oh, I believe that light will find us there. There is an answer. I am just a sailor in a great big sea, searching for what's meant for me. And I thank my lucky stars every single day. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When the storm begins to blow, and when I've lost my way back home, oh, there is an answer. Oh, there is an answer.
Welcome back to Mosaic. Prior to the break, Madam Secretary, we were talking about your experience in the United Nations. You also had another majestic experience. The day, or the evening, I should say, that Bill Clinton, President Clinton, called you for a specific opportunity. Would you care to share that moment?
Well, I would. I mean, the thing that happened was the day before I got a phone call from Erskine Bowles, who was White House Chief of Staff, saying, if the President of the United States were to call you tomorrow, would you take the call? And you think, are you crazy? And then if he were to ask you to be Secretary of State, would you say yes? So I obviously said yes to both questions. And he said, well, go back to Washington, because I was in New York, and the President will call you in the morning. So I went back, and I was just sure that this was not going to happen, that the President would change his mind. And so I was afraid in the morning to even take a shower, and I sat there waiting in my pink bathrobe and no call, and I kind of forgot I was dealing with Bill Clinton, who slept later, and around 9:30 the phone rang, and the White House operator said, "Hold for the President of the United States." And then they put some horrible music on, and I was sure that he'd changed his mind. And then he gets on the phone and he said, "Would you be my Secretary of State?" So it was an incredible moment. Truly, I never imagined it could happen.
Do you think Hillary had anything to do with it?
A lot. And the reason I know why is because President Clinton said so publicly. We were somewhere abroad. We used to do this thing where I would introduce Hillary and she would introduce him. And he said, well, it was due to Hillary because she said, "Why wouldn't you name Madeleine? She's the one that really supports your policies and expresses them better than anybody else. Besides, it would make your mother very happy."
Listen, I have to tell you, you almost got the job for head of Czechoslovakia. Havel wanted to appoint you as the head of the country.
Well, he wanted me to stand for having it be elected, but the bottom line is, and I was so honored, and he was the most amazing man.
He was.
And really, you were talking about moral authority. He really restored moral authority to that small country in the middle of Central Europe. But it didn't make any sense. I'm an American and very proud to be an American, and so I was honored, and I tried to, while he's standing next to me, to say thank you very much, but no thank you.
Yeah. Getting back to Madam Secretary, what was it like working with Bill Clinton?
It was fantastic. He is one of the smartest people I know. And one of the things that I've said often is that I wanted to see a confident president versus a certain president. Because a confident president is somebody who likes to hear people with different views and assesses what they're saying and asks a lot of questions and then makes up his mind. A certain president doesn't even know what he doesn't know. And Bill Clinton was a confident president. He really dug into the issues that we were dealing with, did an amazing amount of his own work, pushed all of us to make our best decisions. I think he really was an outstanding president.
Yeah, you know, he one of the comments in the book was the fact that he embraced your ideas and your opinions, and he encouraged you.
Very
to
much
speak.
so.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing, you know, I'm often asked whether I had trouble with the foreign men, and I didn't. I arrived in a very large plane that said United States of America. I actually had more problem with the men in our own government.
Really?
And partially because I'd had this very long career of being, well, I started out as the carpool mother or a friend of their wife's, and then I was a staffer and different things. And so all of a sudden, I'm there in the middle of these decision-making things, and they were all talking, and the president always made sure, especially when I was ambassador to the UN and then as secretary, that he wanted to hear what Madeleine had to say, and that made a very big difference.
Yeah, it gave you the courage and it gave you the validation that you were looking for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
I want to ask you something. There was an article that came out in the Washington Post, I think it was 1997, February 4th, I think it was, regarding the fact that they discovered that you had a Jewish background. That had to be an awful way to discover a complete transformation in your life.
Well, I begin my book, Prague Winter, by saying I was 59, and I thought I knew who I was, everything about myself, and the country I'd come from. And what happened, just to give you the chronology of this a little bit, when I was at the UN was the first time that I became a public figure. And I started getting letters from people who would say they knew my family and none of the facts were right or anything in it. And then in 96, like November 96, I got a letter from someone that had all the names and facts and dates and everything from this person who said, my family knew your family and they were a very fine Jewish family. So it was just when I was being vetted to be Secretary of State. And at the end of the lawyer said, we ask everybody this question, is there anything about yourself that we should have asked that we didn't? And I said, well, you know, it's perfectly possible I'm of Jewish background. And they said, so what? The president's not anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic, right.
So then over the holidays, I told my 3 daughters and my son-in-laws, and they were fascinated. They already thought, you know, they loved my parents and the whole Czech background and all that. And then you're not allowed to talk to the press between the time that you've been named and the time you're confirmed. And Michael Dobbs from the Washington Post wanted to do a profile of me. So we gave him names of people and things. And then the first week that I was Secretary of State, they came into my office and started handing me these disgusting documents, which were the way Nazis kept track of whom they'd sent to the concentration
You're
camp.
kidding.
No, that's how. And I look at these, and they have family names, and it's one thing to find out you're Jewish, and it's another to find out that more than 24 of your relatives
In
have
the
died.
Holocaust,
And
yeah.
then there was this other whole issue, which is what you referred to as people who thought I'd lied, that I knew. And I had not lied, I did not know. And so the combination of feelings, I don't know if I can ever describe this properly, of this great joy and pride in having been named Secretary of State, and this horror of finding out about what had happened to my family. And then on top of it, to be accused of lying. So it was one of the more confused and difficult times. And just imagine this, we all just saw the State of the Union message. So you know how the Sergeant-at-Arms says, Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet. It was the first time in history, American history, that a woman had led that cabinet line
That's right.
down, and people hugging me and all that. And then I get there, and I think, this is all just, I've been accused of lying, I might have to resign. And so the whole thing was just such a confusion. And the only way I can describe it is as if I'd been asked to represent my country in a marathon, and just as I was about to take off, that somebody gave me a very heavy package and then said, unwrap it as you run. That's the only way I can kind of describe it in a brief way.
That had to be horrible for you. It really did.
Well,
People accused, that's outrageous. That's outrageous. Cutty Martin had the same experience.
Well, quite now that my story kind of, is out there, and I
There are a
wrote
lot
the
of
book,
people.
a lot of people have the same story. The other part that was really, really hurtful, people that were very critical of my parents, but my father especially, which I thought was so unbelievably unfair of, first of all, people didn't know the circumstances, and second, I think that all my parents ever wanted to do was to protect us. And I can understand that now as a mother and grandmother.
Oh, without question. That experience when you went to the Pincus Synagogue in Czechoslovakia,
Yeah.
explain that.
Well, what's interesting is I had gone to Czechoslovakia in the 80s, and at that time the Pincus Synagogue was being refurbished or something. There's this amazing Jewish cemetery in the middle of Prague, and everybody goes to visit, whatever religion they are. And so then I had actually gone to the Pincus Synagogue the first time inside with Hillary in '96, because we were in Prague together. And they tell you that all the names of Czechoslovak Jews are written on the walls.
On the wall, about 77,000, I think.
Thousands, and they're written in tiny, it actually looks kind of like just lines on wallpaper. I mean, you know, but then because I couldn't go right away to the Czech Republic after I found out, so I asked my brother and sister to go, and they met this wonderful man, Thomas Kraus, who is head of the Jewish community in Prague, and he helped them figure things out, but he also took them to the Pincus Synagogue. So then I went in the summer that year, and they showed me the places where my relatives' names were on the wall, and that was one of those moments where I thought, but for my parents, their names would be up there, as would be mine, and my brother and sister would not have existed.
You're absolutely right. Your parents saved your lives.
They did. They gave me life twice.
They literally did. Oh, my Lord, when you think about it. You know, you also went and explained about Theresienstadt, or
Terezin, yeah.
Terezin. And what happened there? Would you share that with our viewers?
Well, it's, I think, one of the most hypocritical places in the entire world. And this is what happened. There obviously were Jews already living in ghettos in Prague and various places. What they did, the Nazis, decide in some ways to seduce the Jews to go there by saying it was a spa. And what had happened was this was an old place. There are really two parts to it. One is a fort that had been established in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the other is, it was a town where the military was, but it was a night, actually, I'd been there when I found all this out, and it looks like a nice town with a square in the middle and nice buildings. But what happened was the Jews did go there, and then they found out that it was a labor camp, and it was not one of those terminal camps, but it was a camp where they transported people to some of the camps further east, to Auschwitz, for instance.
Actually,
And-
didn't they use the camp as a showplace?
Well, and this is what they did. What they decided was the Red Cross wanted to come and inspect them, and they kind of fixed up a whole area, and then they had phony settings for children to be plays and eating, and they brought the Red Cross in, and the Red Cross was completely fooled and gave it a clean bill of
Yeah,
health.
we did something. There was Verdi's Requiem that they sang. That what they couldn't say to Hitler, they sang to
yeah,
him.
No.
I mean, it's an incredible place. I
And it
happened
is
to-
incredible, and it's chilling. There's no other way when
Yeah.
you go there. Yeah.
Tell me, you've had an exciting life. You really have. You've been all over. You've opened doors for women all over the world, and very much so in my stage of
Yeah.
life. What is the biggest thing that has happened to you in your life when you think about it?
The biggest thing that happened to me is to become an American. There is no question about that. I'm very proud to have been born a Czech. But when people ask me what's the most important thing that ever happened, it's hands down, it's becoming an American. We came here in 1948. My father defected. He asked for political asylum. And we came here, and all we ever wanted to do was to become real Americans and become citizens. And I became a citizen when I was between my sophomore and junior year in college. And that is the most important thing that ever happened.
Yeah, the opportunity that you have here.
Amazing. And if you were to ask me what's one word to describe myself,
Yes.
grateful. Unbelievably grateful. And the more I find out about all the things that happen to huge numbers of my family and other people, it makes me even more grateful. The more I thought about, my whole life is an accident. I mean, I could have been dead. I could have been stuck in a communist country. And instead, I got to grow up a free American and then have the opportunity to represent this country.
Well, you know something? We're grateful to have
Well,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
It's great to see you.
Barbara, I must tell you, that was such a special interview. She is so interesting. What a fascinating life.
Yeah, she's a wonderful woman. I tell you something, the book is something well worth reading. I mean, she's an extraordinary woman, and it's so interesting to learn about the commission and everything that's going on in this community. It's wonderful. I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Be with us again next week when we have another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from Mosaic. Special thanks to the K Family Foundation, lead underwriters for Mosaic.